Hey, welcome back guys. This is Jason, KM4ACK. Today, let's take a look at the Digirig sound card. Stick around and we'll get right to it. Real quick before we get going today, I've got to give a shout out to these guys. They're my latest patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the channel, I'll leave a link to Patreon down in the description below. So a couple of you guys had reached out to me and asked if I had seen and or played with this Digirig sound card. And I have to admit, I hadn't played with it when I got those emails. But I reached out to the creator of Digirig and just asked him if he would be willing to send one of these guys over for me to review. And I have a specific project in mind for this little guy that we're going to be doing on the channel in the coming weeks. He was kind enough to send over the Digirig and several cables that I could use with various radios. So let's go ahead and jump over to the bench and take a closer look at this. Okay, so first things first, I just put the Baofeng in the picture so we could have a reference for scale here, so you could kind of tell how big this Digirig was. So that'll give you a pretty good idea of the size of it, and the thickness is almost identical to the Baofeng. So that should give you a pretty good idea of how big or how small this guy is. And we're actually going to open this up in a second and take a look at it. Because it is possible to actually shrink this thing down a little bit more. So Dennis was kind enough to send over the 1.6 version of the Digirig and two different cables. Now at first they kind of look identical except for the color difference here. We've got a black one and then we've got this greenish color as well. And what I discovered with playing with these guys is if you're ready to do audio with the Digirig, you will want to use the black colored cable, but the Digirig has two different connections on it. I'm not sure you're going to be able to see that. I don't know if I can get that to focus or not, but the top one is audio and the bottom one is serial. So with a Baofeng in particular, what we can do is we can use this green colored cable. We would take this one out of the mix. But if we take the green colored cable and plug it into the serial connection, then we could use the Digirig to actually program the Baofeng radio with something, some application like Chirp. So you're really getting two different devices in one when you order the Digirig. So these were the items that I have that I'm going to be working with on an upcoming project that we'll be doing here on the channel shortly. Let's go ahead. I want to get this out of the way, and I'm going to take and remove these four screws, and I want to actually pull out this Digirig, the guts of it, so you guys can see how tiny this is. And there you have it, laying next to a quarter, so you can see how small this little board is. So there's quite a bit of wasted space in here. It's a fantastic metal enclosure, but if you really needed to shrink this thing down for some other project where space was very limited, you could pull it out of its original container and maybe 3D print a case for it that would not consume as much room as the Digirig case itself. So after I've had a little bit more time to play with this Digirig device, I have found a couple of little quirks with it. This doesn't change my overall opinion of the device, but I did want to bring these little quirks to your attention. First of all, if we try to reboot the Raspberry Pi with the Digirig connected to the Pi, I have run into trouble getting it to reboot. As long as I unplug the Digirig and reboot the Pi and then plug it back up, everything is happy. But if I try to reboot with the device plugged up, it seems to hang up until I unplug the Digirig. Now, one other thing that I want to bring to your attention, one other little quirk. Right now I have the Digirig connected to the Raspberry Pi. I'm going to reach over and unplug the Digirig from the Pi, and it does this weird little thing where it's kicking the Baofeng into transmit mode every half a second or so. So I'm not sure what's going on with that, and maybe Dennis will see this video and he can comment down below as to why this may be happening. Now I'll go ahead and plug the Digirig back up, and you see that that stops as soon as I plug the device back up. So not quite sure what's going on with that, but just one of those little quirks. Again, it doesn't change my overall opinion of the Digirig sound card. I still think it's a fantastic device for the price, but there are a couple of little quirks that you might want to be aware of. So I'm pretty excited about this little Digirig sound card. This is fantastic if you don't already have a sound card built into your radio like the ICOM 705. If you're rocking something like one of the Yaesu 857s, 817, the G90, a Baofeng, this is a great little card to have on hand, and it's reasonably priced. If you look at something like the Signalink, you're roughly $120 for a Signalink. This guy, as of the time of this recording, retails for $50. Now, the cables, depending on which ones you need, you're going to have to spend a little bit more money for the cables themselves. But if you bought the Signalink, you would have to invest in the cable for the Signalink and the internal jumper module for the Signalink if you didn't want to hand wire that. So I think all in all, this is a fantastic little device. It'll do double duty with cat control and with handling the audio. And I just think it's hard to beat for this price. So definitely want to thank Dennis for sending this over to me. And I want to say thank you to you guys for tuning in today. If you found this information helpful, be sure to give us a thumbs up before you head off. We will see you guys on the next one. Until then, 7-3.